Try it again. Can you hear me? I can hardly hear you. Hey, good morning, LA aliens. You will not be surprised when I tell you the following. Ready? Hold your breath. We're having some tech issues this morning. Mike, say something. Can I hear you?
Something.
All right. Well, now I can hear him, so we're not having tech issues. All right. That wraps it up for Law and Legitimacy this morning. We hope you've enjoyed the time.
Is you're back from the great wild yonder. You've got a stable internet connection. You've got a great input system for your audio. And I just have to adjust some levels, and we have to get back to homeostasis here, because we're not.
Homeostasis.
Yeah,
I'm heading to LA tomorrow to play at comedy.
Homo what?
Yeah, really. What kind of stasis? How about some heterostasis? You know, I mean, what are you trying to say? I mean, I love you too, Mike, but I mean, me not love you a long, long time.
So you're going to LA. What are you doing in LA?
I am. Some more comedy workshops and going to spend some time at comedy clubs and get on my feet for some performances here and there. And, try to figure out whether I can make a successful transition from a trial lawyer to a stand-up comic. It shouldn't be that difficult to transition, because both involve being on your feet in front of strangers, reading the room, and trying to convey a message. And what in the life of a criminal defense lawyer, you're used to people laughing in the courtroom. So usually they're laughing at you and your claims on behalf of your obviously guilty client. Hopefully we can learn to laugh when I want them to laugh. But it's, so it's fun. I'm enjoying it, but I head out tomorrow afternoon. That holds into question what we're going to do Friday and Monday morning. We should talk about that, but we should probably not talk about that on everybody else's time. Hey, if you're looking at the newspapers this morning, you're wasting your time. You should be listening to us. I grabbed the New York Times this morning and looked at it, and I'm like, man, they have such a love affair with the Ukraine. I mean, they can't talk at all about Trump's success in Carolina without holding their nuts and saying, my God, the Republic's going to collapse.
What nuts?
But yeah, no kidding. They're nutlets, right? So one of the pieces. So I'm working on some material as I get ready to head to LA, and I'm thinking, okay, we've got the Black national anthem, and maybe next year it's a Super Bowl, they'll have the trans national anthem. So I've been trying to rework something, and I can't get much farther than the following, and I need some help, folks. So if you've got some suggestions, I'll take it. But oh, say, can you pee sitting down or on your feet? And then, I mean, it just doesn't, I mean, I can't sing, I don't have the lyrics, but I'm thinking a transnational anthem might do it. But anyhow, big standoff in Congress.
I got a question. Who's Jose?
He's No Way's brother. Why?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's a they them maybe. Jose, they them, can you pee? Right?
Yeah, all right. Jose, can you? Yeah, no, that would be it. Welcoming transgender American illegal immigrants.
Jose,
can you pee?
They pee. Can they pee? Use a pronoun.
Now, I mean, is you speciesist? I mean, I don't know, because I refer to my dog as you, and so I think you is still a safe term. But let's not go down this sinkhole. Let's go down a different sinkhole. Let's talk about what's going on in Congress and the administration, and whether we're looking at another government shutdown. I actually think it might be a good idea to have a partial shutdown of the government. Look, consider the debate. Should we spend tens of billions of dollars more on Ukraine? Should we prop up Taiwan? Should we be dumping billions into Israel? That's a harder case for me, because I'm just unflinchingly supportive of Israel, to the point of being inconsistent, and therefore opening myself to criticism. But what else is new? But should we pour tens of, if not hundreds of billions of dollars into foreign aid when we can't even secure our own borders and we can't take care of ourselves? And I mean, to me, that's an open question. The White House spokesman, I think Jake Sullivan, was on one of the talking head shows this week, and talked about the prospect of a government shutdown and saying, the there you go. We're not stepping up to its responsibility, Jake said. What is our responsibility, Jake, to the Ukraine? Why exactly are we spending money that we don't have to prop up a regime that we don't really have an interest in supporting, when we can't reach a consensus about how to care for our own communities, when we can't reach a consensus about how to care for our own veterans, when increasingly we find out that there are what I'll call black sites in our communities where the government is housing unlawful immigrants without the consent of communities, without the input of communities, and the media is doing an absolute layup and not even covering it. I mean, Mike, I think you sent me a story this morning about the use of a premier facility in Greensboro to house migrants without really any consent from the local community or notice to the local community. At least this made the news. What's going on in Greensboro?
And it made the news barely back in December. But the reason I brought it up is because Trump is coming to Greensboro on Saturday. And
How
obviously,
far is Greensboro from you?
I live in Greensboro.
So not far at all. Outright, are you going to see the Donald? Will you go and make a report to us?
I don't know. I didn't know that he was coming to Greensboro until really early in the morning this morning. So I've thought no further of it than prepping for this stream.
We want our roving ear onto the ground, Mike Boyer, to attend the Trump rally and to record the sounds of it. I think this would be a tremendously fascinating event for you to go to assess the mood and the size of the crowd on your own, and then compare it to what you read about in your local coverage and your national coverage. Because what I suspect is happening is Trump is playing to crowds that are remarkably enthusiastic for him. I hear they're large. I haven't been to one. And then we're seeing no reporting on it. Almost as though this is a non-event, or such reporting as occurs comes reports on the malapropisms, the misuse of words. They cast him as making authoritarian pronouncements. I just don't think that's what's happening at that rally. I think he's putting logs on a populist fire, and I want to understand the energy of that populism. Can I persuade you to go?
I think so. That's not a hard sell at all. I think that, just for posterity, it's almost a civic duty to be there, and it's right here in my backyard. So I think I can make provision for that.
And if you can get to his team, give him an opportunity to appear on Law and Legitimacy. Tell him
We will,
it might boost his credibility in the eyes of some.
hey, maybe we're gonna have a little de facto LAL meetup. Uncle Pat saying that he'd meet me there. So just to tease out the issue within Greensboro, this is in the New York Sun today, and they are quoting and citing a Monmouth poll that is showing that Americans' support for a border wall has reached 53%, which is a historical high. Consider that back in 2016, 2017, when Trump was very hawkish on the notion of a border wall, and if you allow me to use this word, Norm, somewhat prophetic in the ills that would befall us in years subsequent to his presidency with respect to the lack of security or attention or focus on the southern border. And all we needed at that point was $5 billion that Congress wouldn't allocate in full to the construction of the border wall. At that time, Norm, and what's quoted in this article is that he was never, in terms of support, there was never anything north of low 40 percentage points.
Wow.
The wall. This is very significant, therefore, for us to be looking at something that is 53% right in the face, that the average American feels that building a border wall is a necessity for our national security and our national
interest. Here's the thing that just flummoxes me this morning. Flummox, that's another word. I hope you don't mind I use it. I just love the word flummox. I got to put it in a legal brief the other day, and I was waiting for some comment from one of my adversaries, but it didn't occur. We can propose spending multiples of what it would take to build a border wall in the Ukraine. absent any compelling justification for why we should spend that money. But we can't build a border wall to assure orderly entrance into the United States along the southern border. Contrast this to Egypt's response to the Hamas Palestinian problem. They've got a wall up, and apparently it's patrolled, and apparently if you cross it without authorization, you get thrown back on the other side. I I certainly don't want to live in Egypt, don't want to live in Palestine either. Not sure I'd want to live in Texas these days. But if 53% of Americans are saying build a wall, that's more than a xenophobic impulse. That might be saying, look, we're having problems adjusting to the great number of people that are coming into their communities. Local schools, local institutions are being transformed into migrant centers. We're spending billions of dollars domestically, making sure that people who arrive here illegally have housing, have 3 meals, have the opportunity to get social services, while we've got veterans who put their lives on the line sleeping on the streets. I mean, this is why I think a government shutdown is a good idea. I mean, will I like it if I wake up and my local community is, the gears are grinding loud and maybe the street lights aren't working right? No, but we're tending in that direction anyhow. As a gross matter, our priorities are vastly out of skew. And I think a government shutdown reflects the fact that we don't have a vision of a collective life going forward. We've got warring parties that can't agree, and the result is basic services are suffering. Okay, I'm good with that. Let's let them collapse. And I'm quite serious about that. Let's let institutions crumble.
Let
And
them
then let's rebuild
let
around a common vision of what the national interest is, because we just don't have one right now. But what's this former ICE employee linked to contract for Greens? I'm really intrigued by this story, Mike, because, 3 years ago, I heard from David X. Sullivan, a former congressional candidate and former federal prosecutor in Connecticut, who told me that he was getting reports that planes were landing in the Westchester County Airport after midnight. Westchester County being just over the border in western Connecticut, and busloads of people were coming out of those. People were coming out of those planes, packed on buses, and sent to local communities in the dead of night, so that they could be located in those communities when nobody was awake to notice or care. And I wasn't sure I believed that. Because it just sounded too crazy to be real, and it sounded too crazy to be real and to not be reported on. And now, 2.5, 3 years later, we begin to see these pop-up stories. What's going on at this facility, and what is it? What is?
according to this article,
And where does it appear? Is it a credible source?
yes, this is the Carolina Journal, and this is
Oh, well, wait a minute, Carolina. Okay, so we've got to discount it for for lost cause Southern bullshit. But beyond that, yeah.
right. So according to this article, and what I've got on the screen is an aerial shot of what has traditionally been known as the American Hebrew Academy here in Greensboro, North Carolina. My understanding, Norm, is that the American Hebrew Academy, while it is state of the art in terms of its facilities, its grounds, you can see how and anything with a teal top there is safe to assume as part of the campus. So you see, even as far as the lake there, that there is a building, a dock, for purposes of some sort of aquatic recreational activity. You see really nice athletic
I'm
facilities.
here from Ecuador. Where do I sign up for my water skiing lessons?
It's according to this article, and then looking around at some of the publicly available information here from Greensboro City Council, it's clear that this academy was actually never it never lived out its purpose. So it was facilitated and built. I think there was a $26 million loan, and this was built, but it was never brought to fruition in terms of an educational institution. The Department of Health and Human Services has recently signed a 5-year, $50 million contract. So that's the federal Department of Health and Human Services, in specifically to house unaccompanied migrant children to the tune of at least 800 to be housed here. And Greensboro has no contractual privity with the federal government for this system whatsoever. So while Mayor Nancy Vaughn would be quoted as saying that this cost the Greensboro citizens, the Greensboro community, nothing, it also reeks of abrogation of duty and complete and utter negligence in terms of there's no transparency as to what is actually happening here. We have essentially ceded territory, private land within the Greensboro jurisdiction to federal authorities. And based on these next door posts that I was sending to you, Norm, there's a groundswell of inquiry and criticism from the community here trying to get information as to what is actually happening at this facility. Now, you were talking about sort of overnight transportation. Greensboro is a central transportation hub, both ground and aviation. In fact, the what is known as Air Force One, when the president is on board, does touch and goes at
Now
PTI.
Air Force -1 when Joe is on, hey, do we got the escalator for steps? And, do we have the hooked on, do we have the large print menu so that he can point at the right thing?
Notably, this airport is, I think, in terms of square footage and length, is I think perhaps the longest in the country, right? So it has the most room. It's an industrial commercial airport, and there's a major expansion operation going on right now. This is somewhere where routine military maneuvers are practiced. This is where Air Force One, when it is not known as Air Force One without the president, does touch and goes. I can see things in the air from time to time that are actually quite impressive, right? And unexpected. But what I'm saying is that Greensboro is sort of a below the radar location for a number of things. Syngenta is headquartered here. Volvo Mac is headquartered here. Honda Jet is headquartered here. Boom Supersonic. There is a major industrial and commercial hub here in Greensboro, and there is also a huge natural gas reservoir here in Greensboro as well. So there is a lot that the federal government has an interest in terms of aviation, commercial transportation, natural resources, and fuel resources, sort of co-located here, and that's to the exclusion of Charlotte and Raleigh, respectively, right? Those are the two cities in North Carolina that get most of the fanfare. Greensboro is silently, perhaps, the power player within the state, but it's completely and wholly mismanaged by those who are on city council and in city government. Now we have a situation where the federal government, because there is a very kind and a mutually gratifying relationship between the federal government, the governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, and the mayor of Greensboro, Nancy Vaughn, we have this weird kinship between local, state, and federal, where all of these things that you see on a national stage, right, all of these things that you see in the national press or independent reporting that talk about the uniparty, Greensboro is actually a microcosm of all of these various issues, whether you label it corruption, some sort of authoritarian impulse, whatever it is. And you can trace this to COVID and the shutdowns. I could go on for hours. However, this case study of the American Hebrew Academy and this sort of silent treatment of this facility as a container for unaccompanied migrant children in the context of the southern border and the immigration crisis that is going on right now is something that I am really hoping to elevate for President Trump as he makes his way to Greensboro this weekend. Nothing would make me feel better than to him.
Who owns the academy, and who's the beneficiary of this
So
lead?
the American Hebrew Academy, that is the entity that owns this facility. And as I understand it, there is a major loan from, I believe, a Chinese company to actually facilitate the development of this. It was supposed to be a sort of an international boarding school of sorts, right? This was the state of the art. And when I first moved to Greensboro, that was sort of the common parlance, was a reverence for this facility and its aspirations. I don't know. I don't have an explanation as
Who's
to
going
why.
to staff it? I
Well,
mean,
that's another
what
issue.
standards will govern?
That's another issue for the Nextdoor app with these screenshots that I was sending you of people saying that apparently, these employees have to be vetted really invasively. They can't take the same routes to work week to week. There's a huge opaque veil over top.
It's terrifying. I mean, it reminds me, two things come to mind as I'm listening to you talk. First, the vast amount of territory the United States government owns out west and how controversial that is to Westerners. But then second, the Lend-Lease program in World War II, when America was trying to maintain its neutrality and England needed support, Roosevelt said, well, we're not going to give them foreign aid. We're going to lend /lease material, which amounted to giving them stuff. So what we have here is a sort of immigration lend land lease program where the government is taking control of private property within local communities and trying apparently to keep this, if not hidden, at least difficult to learn about in a local community. It's exactly the sort of trend that feeds the populist fire that yields people to support Donald Trump. Because when you want to hear about folks worrying about globalism, about foreign or distant control of their lives dictating the terms that they live by, look no further than a boarding school financed by the Chinese, leased by the government, staffed by strangers, doing things that you may or may not know about. I mean, to me, it's just bizarre. I'm breathless, and it makes me wonder that if this is going on in Greensboro, and we're lucky you're there to see it, what else is going on in every other community in the country that we just don't know about? Because the New York Times would rather write about Sweden joining NATO or shutting down the government to support Ukraine than it would about building communities in the United States where people feel that they have a sense of efficacy and control of what's going on in their own backyard. It's just breathtaking, Mike.
I put this comment on the screen, and I know it's a bit of a departure from where we were going, and I'll throw it back up real quick. But I did want to make sure to acknowledge it. This is a comment that comes from Jackson Barrett over on Rumble. Quote, RFK Jr. indicates that this whole Ukraine scam is about BlackRock getting control over 75% of their farmlands, collateral seizure on the loans. So this is number one, just reading and taking that at face value. Norm, this reminds me, or at least rhymes a bit with the fall of the Soviet Union and what occurred, when the West infused that area of the world with cash in exchange for shares of Mother Russia from those that were given that because the country was broke, right? So collateral seizure on the loans is an interesting perspective, but I also can verify that the farmland angle appears to hold water. Why? Because I have a subject matter expertise in the beer industry, and a predominant portion of export, of the imports of wheat and barley come from where? Ukraine. So when all of this started, there was a lot of frenetic energy and a lot of indecision and ambiguity as to how supply chains of malted barley was going to make its way, and future crops were going to make their way from that area of the world to the domestic shores of the U.S.
Well, interesting. So have beer prices gone up as chaos ensued in the Ukraine?
Well, craft beer was always expensive, but there are ways to offset that.
What day would be complete these recent weeks without some discussion of fabulous Fani, or is it fat ass Fanny, Willis, and her peregrinations, her travels around the United States? What's new now? She's got a thing for mass murder.
So this is really, really funny to me. In our chat when we first started, I want to acknowledge a few people in the Rumble chat as well as on YouTube. But earlier on, BTL Bathtub Liquor says, "Did you see that there are some updates in the Fani Willis situation? Fani Willis decision. Bradley is supposed to be back on the stand today."
Oh, really? No, I didn't. Interesting.
So this is as
at what point do they start pleading the fifth? I mean, that's what I want to know.
Well, and that's an interesting question, but I wanted to bring this up because one of my really good friends called me over the weekend, and we were talking. He was, giving me an anecdote about, something that he had experienced in his work life, and he used the word childish, which I hadn't heard a serious person use the word childish, and I don't know how long, and it reverberated for a moment. It's like, not only is it it's childish, and I thought to myself, that's exactly right. So the headline here is something about Fani Willis claiming that she and Nathan Wade weren't always at her house or the condo or wherever it was, but on multiple occasions they were visiting the crime scene of where a murderer motivated by race was murdering people, which happened to be Asian people predominantly, by the way, Norm, those ones that she's referring to.
I mean, what is it, a better orgasm if you can hump on the mass grave, or what? Tell us.
Think about how immature and unevolved of a reaction that is to criticism facing down your prosecutorial discretion, your ethical and moral obligations and candor toward the tribunal for you to say, wow, in the face of evidence, getting at your improprieties. Wow, we were actually visiting someone, or we were visiting a crime scene location where there were people murdered by someone motivated by race. Are you 3? Are you 3 years old? And is this the standard that we've set for people in her position?
Unfortunately, it is, because when criticized for a genuine moral failing, deflect to identity and deflect to your privileged position. You know, Fanny is going to have, obviously, her only real defense is, you're only doing this to me because I'm black. And the only responsible or non-childish rebuke is, no, we're doing this to you because you're a dishonest human being. The fact that you're black doesn't excuse or justify this. You know, I've been telling you folks about this book I'm reading by Yasha Munk called The Identity Trap, and he basically talks about race essentialism. You know, if race is a social construct, strategic essentialism. If race is a social construct, then why do we complain about it? We should just it's not real. But people adopt race as an ideological perspective to advance their interests. So race is a social construct, but it's constructed in such a way as to disadvantage me. Therefore, in order to claim the advantages of being a member of an oppressed group in a society devoted to social justice, I will trumpet my blackness. Funny, you don't win points for becoming the goddess of the oppressed on your late night orgasm tours with Nathan Wade. It just doesn't work. Childish isn't, is an interesting way to put it, Mike. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that I'd be that generous.
Well, yeah, and I think Jackson Barrett says infantilism as a defense strategy, which I think is brilliant. Fani is a great porn star name. T-Girl offers this, though, which I think is an excellent counterpoint to both of our perspectives here. T-Girl says, think about how using identity politics has worked for her up until this point.
It has, and but now it's her undoing. Because she's climbed the ladder of race and gender, and she's broken through these various glass ceilings, and God bless her. And she is according to the Michael Isikoff book, she's a hard worker, and she prepares, and she's difficult with her staff. These are all attributes of what one would expect of a successful prosecutor. But if she thinks she gets a pass, because she is goddess of the oppressed, or because she can tap dance on the tombs at mass graves, she's wrong. I mean, ultimately, integrity matters, and Fani is showing that she doesn't really have much, and she is becoming unglued in real time.
So I want to give you a couple of moments here. We got a couple of minutes. Look at us running out of time. Well, not running out of time as usual, but the issue number 6 of the newsletter will be published today at 9 a.m. Eastern. So it'll be hitting your inboxes in about half an hour. And Norm, you have some really good stuff. Number one, what we're reading this week is, spoiler alert, the Bible. And I read this from you and was really moved. So I'm not going to spoil anything more than that, but I loved reading that part of the piece. But would you give us sort of I know we covered this case yesterday, regarding the concurrence to not take the petition for cert for the Missouri case. But you've spun, I don't want to say spun, but you've actually taken that case and you have explained how it showcases the enduring appeal of one Donald Trump. Will you give us a little more background? And I'm trying to get people to continue subscribing to this. Go to lawpoddaily.com, put in your email when the pop-up comes up, and you'll get these every Monday and or Tuesday.
And sometimes Wednesday, and sometimes not at all, because we're busy and we're struggling, and we need your support, folks. You think it's easy coming up with this stuff? So, in the enduring appeal of Donald Trump, I put my cards on the table. Why am I voting for Trump? Not because I think he's a brilliant statesman, one of the finer moralists of our time, a man who I would aspire to become like, or who I'd want my children to become like. No. I mean, Donald Trump represents, in my view, the fed up American. And I won't, yeah, and maybe that's the new category. It's not the silent majority. It's the fed up American, the person who's getting out of bed every day, trying to cope with meeting his or her responsibilities to his or her loved ones and community, and is constantly being assaulted by the need to change, transform, and adopt someone else's agenda, and is now being told that your their identity, and if you happen to be white and working class, your identity is suspect, and you're either a racist or an anti-racist, and if you claim that you're blind to race, that means you're a racist, and therefore you're within the clutches of white supremacy. And really, that's what white supremacy has become. It has become a rhetorical club. Give me what I want, or I'm going to call you names. And I think Donald Trump kind of burst through the bullshit bubble. And what I like about him is his insouciance, his attitude, his sense of, you know what, fuck you. I'm not playing that game. And I think that that summarizes the attitude of many American voters. And so in the Alito um, uh, piece that we discussed yesterday in his decision, what he wrote about the lack of certiorari in the Missouri Department of Corrections case, he said, I worried when the Supreme Court endorsed a constitutional right for gay marriage that people with traditional values would become marginalized and would become targeted and would become scorned. And I think that worry has come to pass. And there are a bunch of people who are saying, wait a minute, not so fast. We're fed up and we're not going to take it anymore. And it's not going to descend into violence. It's not going to, they're not white supremacists putting on Ku Klux Klan robes. They're just ordinary Americans saying enough is enough already. And I think that's Donald Trump's appeal. He's a real guy. You go to the bar, and who's that liquored up idiot at the end spouting off at CNN when the anchor starts talking trash? Why, it's Donald Trump. Now, does that mean you want his fingers on the trigger of nuclear weapons? I have my doubts about the guy, but I don't have my doubts about what he represents in the American political life. And what I think he represents is a protest of the ordinary people who are saying politics has become absurd and we're tired of being held captive to the latest aggrieved party, tap dancing on the tomb of mass murders with her lover to justify avoiding the common norms that we are expected to live by. I think so.
Dawn asks, why is Trump support frequently prefaced with disclaimers? Stop it. And I tend to agree.
That's a great point, Dawn.
I tend to agree.
Well, in part because my wife is just furious with me for my support of Donald Trump. And it's, I think she views me as an alien living with her, and she's probably right. But I love her nonetheless, and I'm lucky to have her. I hope you're not listening, dear. But if you are, I'm aware of your disapproval. But yet I see what I see, and I can't pretend otherwise.
Thinking man, I don't want to, please don't take this the wrong way, but I do want to highlight your comments here on Rumble. Thinking man says several things. No way he single-handedly destroyed the Republican Party. After Trump, the Republicans will have to reorganize. We saw what 4 years of a disruptor got us. I just, out front here, I don't think so. I think that respectfully, and I do mean, but that is a very defensive mentality and what I would venture to call loser think. We saw what 4 years, that's like battered wife syndrome, right?
Yeah, we didn't get into any foreign wars. The economy was doing fine until COVID hit.
We getting backhanded, and I guess I should just lower my voice, and he wouldn't hit me so hard, or maybe he won't hit me today. Maybe he'll let me eat with it. It's just like very, very wild. Number one, I'm a registered independent, so I'm being asked to represent the conservative side of the platform on a new segment or a new show from the Shade Room, which is going to be politically to the left. But I'm a registered independent. I'm being asked to present the conservative side of this for what this lawfare means for Donald Trump. So I submit back to you, thinking man, more substantively to your point, how is the current Republican Party reaching me in my generation? There is already a problem. So I'm fine with Donald Trump eviscerating and burning that to the ground. Right now, I can't really see anything that it represents anyway. And in fact, all of the issues that we talk about with respect to the billions and billions and billions being sent to Ukraine, that takes a common effort to do, right? So there's something out of sync with the current Republican Party. The latest iteration is not a winning mentality. And you just said, we saw what 4 years of a disruptor got us. Yeah, it actually brought everything out into the open. It's all very and abundantly clear now. Sorry.
No, I think that's right. And, I appreciate the comments, thinking man. I'd like having a disruptor in the White House because I don't want the federal government assuming that its role is to serve as the font of a good life. I don't think the federal government's responsibility is to achieve social justice. I don't think its responsibility is to create equality of conditions. I believe in minimal government, and I believe that when somebody calls bullshit on the effort of government to transform society, that's a good thing. So, is the Republican Party going to have to regroup after Donald Trump? Absolutely. So there's Vivek Ramaswamy talking a mean game. I hope he gets, if there is a second Trump administration, I hope he gets a primary role. I hope he gets seasoned, and I'd like to hear more from him. There is a republic out there. The point I have about Trump supporters is they're not going away. There are a lot of frustrated people out there who are to whom Trump is appealing because he voices and symbolizes that frustration. Take away the canary, and the coal mine still exists. And so we'll have to develop a new cadre of leadership. And that's one of the things we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah. I mean,
Vaughn's loving you, Mike.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. The current Republican Party let the current Democrat Party rip its whole shtick away. Now the Democrat Party is pro-war, it's wild. Just stole their whole steez and didn't do a damn thing about it. What the hell is the Republican Party? I grew up with the Republican Party being the party of war, right? The big corporatists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the same criticism that we now lob at the current regime, the hostile regime that we call the Big D Democrat Party. That was completely stolen. That whole playbook used to be that of the Republican Party, right? And except the Democrat Party now has all the old institutions that it inhabited beforehand, at least from a policy perspective and from a theoretical, philosophical perspective. But they've abandoned that because that's not the moneymaker, right? Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's the issue that the Republicans.
Oh, we just got a note here from Fani Willis. She says, Mr. Pattis, I understand you are Greek. Would you be interested in coming with me on a tour to Turkey to visit the sites of mass graves of Greeks slaughtered by Turks? No, Fani, I don't think I will. No. Thank you for the invite, though.
All right. Well, you can find us here every day, 8 a.m. on X at LawPod Daily, YouTube at LawPod Daily, and over there on Rumble, where we get a lot of viewership but very little traction. You can find us there at Law and Legitimacy. You can also find the audio-only versions of this stream uploaded to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium podcasts. We do ask that you subscribe to something and leave a positive review. Make sure you leave a thumbs up on the video. And if you're feeling generous today, subscribe to the newsletter. Again, I cannot commend Norm's pieces in this week's issue enough. Norm, what do you got? Anything?
AMF, yo-yo.
AMF, yo-yo. See you tomorrow, everybody.